Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel, and hi if you're new here, I'm Jade, and it's time for the March wrap-up. I feel like I got a really good mix of books read through March, and overall it was still a pretty strong month. I like to think that I'm good at picking out books I like. There were a couple that maybe were slightly disappointing compared to what I thought they would be, and what's really exciting about this video is it is the first time trialing my new microphone and camera setup, so this might change a little bit over the next few videos just as I figure out what are the best settings for my room, the lighting at the time of day. This is way more technical than anything I've ever done, so I'm figuring it out. If any of you shoot on like a Sony camera or anything and have any tips for me, please leave them in the comments or message me or something on my socials. But I think I'm getting there. We'll see how this turns out. But without further ado, let's get on and let me talk about what I've read this month. So the first book I read this month was a romance. It is in fact an ARC, so I read it digitally. Let me share the cover with you. As you can see, I really enjoyed it with the 5-star rating. I'm a big fan of Holly Michelle's. She had given me an ARC previously, and so it was great that I managed to read this one too. This one is out on August 11th, just so you know, but let me tell you what it's about. So in the story, we follow Cole, who is a ghost, essentially. He works in the afterlife in like admin, and he accidentally kills the wrong person. There's a bit of a name mix-up, and he kills this woman called Dell, and it was before her time. He begs his boss for a chance to fix this, and she agrees that yes, he can, but he must go onto Earth, meet Dell in ghost form, because she is a ghost now that she is supposedly dead. And then the way to save her is for her to figure out what was the mistake she made in her life. So together they try to work this out. So honestly, I loved this book. I laughed, I cried, and I feel like any book that can make me cry is worthy of the 5-star rating. Obviously the topic is death, so I do think because I'm a bit of an empath that I probably cry easier than some people to this topic, but I honestly, I loved it. Yes, it was like a little bit cliche rom-com vibes, I guess, through this, but it also, even though it was sort of predictable and I did predict the end, how it came about, I didn't predict. There's also some really good side characters in this story, like Jason, Dell's friend, is just amazing and I love him as a character. And honestly, I would describe this book as almost a bit like B.K. Borison's Good Spirits, mixed with the movie Just Like Heaven with like Reese Witherspoon, if you've ever seen it. But if you enjoy your rom-com novels, definitely pick this one up in August. I just thought it was really well done. And as I said, side characters are great. And I think that adds a lot to a book. So the second book I read was Jennette McCurdy's Half His Age. As you can see, I rated it 3 stars. It wasn't exactly because I didn't love it, it's just that it is a very uncomfortable topic. So for those that don't know, this follows a girl called Waldo who is at high school. She ends up having an affair with one of her married high school teachers. And you kind of see that her mom is quite a neglectful parent. She doesn't really look after Waldo and she has a lot of problems of her own. And so you can kind of see where this may spawn from. Honestly, there isn't a lot more to the plot than this affair. That's what it's all based around. It's quite a short novel. Now, if you've read I'm Glad Your Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy, her autobiography, you will see the influence behind this fictional tale that she has written. This is her fictional debut, and I do think she's very brave for going for this topic, and I actually admire her for it. I know a lot of people instantly pretty much DNF this book because of the topic, and it is uncomfortable, but what I really appreciate about what she did is that she didn't romanticize the topic. It is meant to be uncomfortable to read. You're supposed to feel a bit ugh as you read it, and that's as it should be. Now, I went to a school where a student did have an affair with a teacher, so, you know, these things really happen, and so I think it's important to actually write about them. So I actually think this is a really good read for everyone, just because you can kind of see the darker side of life, honestly, and if you've read her autobiography, as I said, you'll see a lot of her own life kind of influence this book, and hers was pretty dark, so I think it's very realistic. It is a little smut heavy, I guess, but again, that's to make it uncomfortable. I think it's kind of important. So when I'm saying, oh yes, everyone should read this, you might ask, why did I only rate it 3 stars? The reasons being, as I said, it is uncomfortable. I'm not going to reread this, even though I think it's an effective read. I'm never going to pick this up again. Also, I think it was a little too focused on the relationship with the teacher. I would have liked to see a little bit more with just other teachers, a little bit more with the mum. even though we got the gist of everything that was going on, I do actually think this could have done with being a little bit longer and a little bit more detailed. Also, the ending was just very, very abrupt for me. And even though I totally understand it, I just kind of wanted more. Just to kind of, you can't really wrap up a story like this, but just to give it a little bit more closure, I guess. Would recommend to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation and just kind of force yourself to read something that makes you feel that way. Now, obviously, if it's going to be triggering, don't do that. But I do think there's a lot to learn from this book. And the next book I then picked up was a very different vibe and very much needed in the moment. It's a nice cozy fantasy, and that is Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. This was on my radar for being released this year. I put it in my most anticipated releases video. As you could probably tell from the beginning of the video, because Tato was up here, I am a cat mom. I also have a new one called Toffee. I don't think she's been in the frame of like any of my videos yet, but I do have 2 cats. I am a huge cat mom. I'm a huge cat lover in general. I've always grown up with cats, and therefore this book was just calling out to me. So in this book, we follow Agnes, and she runs a cat shelter, and she needs a new premises like ASAP. She stumbles across somewhere with really good value rent. It seems a bit too good to be true. She's a bit anxious about it, but she's desperate, so she agrees. And then she soon realizes that there's something strange going on. There are people like coming in and out of the building, and she's like, oh, yeah, no, we're definitely a front for something. Well, it turns out in the basement, there was like a magician that lives there, and he does sort of magical dealings down there, which is illegal in this town, I guess. You find out they don't like magicians because there was like this massive explosion that sort of destroyed the area, I think, at one point, and yeah, it's kind of feared, I suppose. Like power and magic is feared, which is natural. However, this magician that lives below her cat shelter starts to need her help, and she ends up getting involved to try and save not only sort of her cat shelter, but him also. So as you can see, I rated this a 4-star. I might be a little bit generous with it, I'm not gonna lie, but I think after reading such a dark book beforehand, this is just what I needed in the moment. But I will say the plot pacing was a little bit off for me. I found it quite slow at first, and then like everything just happened at the end, and I was like, whoa, okay. However, the cats are adorable. I honestly just wanted more of the cats and the coziness, I think. Like I could have done with a little bit more of that, even though that wouldn't have made the plot any faster per se, but I just felt like those bits were just, I love them. So yeah, definitely a cute, easy read. Definitely pick it up, especially as like a palate cleanser type book, I think, when you just need a little break, especially if you're reading something very intense like I had been. So yeah, a great one to read if you love cats, honestly. And then the next book I read was another ARC that I read digitally. So again, I will display the cover. And this is another writer who I read an ARC from last year called Victoria Lavine. And I enjoyed her book last year, but this one I think I liked even more. So this one is called Not That Kind of Proposal, and it is that sort of cheesy rom-com romance vibes again, but I just really enjoyed the characters here. So this one is written in a dual point of view. We follow Gracie, whose boss has just passed away, and she gets left a cottage from her boss. And then we also follow Jude, who is the grandson of Gracie's boss. He inherits the main house, which is where they have been working doing weddings. That's their sort of job. They're like wedding planners, wedding organizers in their own venue. Now, Jude, the grandson, wants to sell the house, but because the grandma has given the cottage on the grounds to Gracie, there's a bit of a conflict. He has a buyer that's interested, but he can't sell it without the cottage. They're not interested without it being a package deal. It's kind of a mystery as to why, and that's sort of part of the plot, so I'm not going to talk any more about who his buyers are or anything like that. But what ends up happening is Gracie persuades him to let her do one more wedding, and he's going to help her with it, and she's going to try and persuade him to keep the business if this wedding goes well. So of course they have to start working quite closely together, and then our rom-com element begins. So yeah, overall really, really enjoyed it. It is very cheesy, cliche rom-com, but as I said, I really, really like the characters in this book. I think Gracie's a great character. Jude's also a great character as you learn more about him. It is enemies to lovers style. The only reason I haven't given it a full 5-star rating is because the wedding that Gracie's planning is her ex-boyfriend's, and it just adds a bit of a strange dynamic that I don't feel like was fully explored that it could have been. But other than that, like honestly, it's a great story if you like your romance novels, so go pick it up if you're a huge romance fan. It does contain spice as well, just so you know, in case you don't like that. But yeah, there is a little spice. And then the fifth book I read was The Ministry of Time by Kalaine Bradley. Now, this is one that my TBR jar chose, and I chose it for like, I think, book I'm scared of or something like that. The TBR prompt was because I just felt a little intimidated by this book. It's not like my typical genre. I'm starting to read a little bit more sci-fi based novels now, but this still felt very much out of my comfort zone. However, as you can probably tell, I ended up loving this book. So like I said, it is a sci-fi, but I'd call it sci-fi romance. There is a bit of a romantic element to it. So in this book, we follow our protagonist, whose name we never actually learn, which is kind of interesting and actually didn't bother me, which I sort of realized later. I was like, oh, we never learned her name. But we follow our protagonist, and she is essentially something called a bridge. And what happens is the organization she works for, they bring people back from the past, or they've brought a few people back from the past. And the bridge's job is to make them sort of settle in modern day society. We don't really know why these people have been chosen to be brought back from the past. That's part of the novel. Why are they chosen? And our protagonist gets paired with a guy from the past, and they start to feel like a little bit of attraction there. And also, not everything is as it seems, so they have to figure this out. Honestly, I can't say too much more, otherwise it really does give it away. Like, the plot isn't super plot heavy, but there's enough going on that it really hooked me from the beginning. I really felt invested in the characters, and if you have been thinking of trying to branch out and do a little sci-fi, I think this is a really good one to branch out with, because it has, you know, little bits of other genres in there, like romance, that just make it not too sci-fi heavy for someone who's new to the genre. But I think it's a really interesting concept. I love the idea of like bringing someone back from the past, like for certain reasons. I think it's quite a unique way of exploring time travel, because most of the time, if I've seen shows or read about time travel in books, it's always someone returning to the past and what they experienced in the past. I've never seen them like go there, pluck someone out, bring them back and say, oh, this is what happens as they adapt. I think that's quite an interesting way to look at things. And then the sixth book I read was A Study in Drowning by Reid, chosen for its sprayed edges on my TBR jar. This is like a YA dark academia type fantasy. So in this book we follow Effie, who is a girl that wanted to study literature, but in this world it's very misogynistic, and she's actually studying engineering, and that's still rare for a woman, but she's managed to be allowed on this course. And she actually gets invited to her favorite late author's house. So he has passed away. It's the son that has invited her. She gets invited there to sort of remodel the house as an engineer. But obviously, being that she loves literature and it was her favorite writer that lived there, she is so excited to go there and just learn everything about him. However, when she gets there, there is a student there called Preston from the literature department, and he has been sent there from his professor to like collect some artifacts, or that's what they've been told. However, he's actually secretly trying to discredit the writer that Effie loves. He's trying to prove that he didn't write all of his released books. And while there is quite clear that not everything is all as it seems, there's a bit of a kind of horror element to this book, because there's like sort of supernatural things. It is quite dark actually for a YA, but like it's not like scary. But yeah, as they notice these strange things going on, Effie ends up helping Preston to look into this query of whether her favorite author did actually write all of his books. So I gave it 4 stars. To be honest, it's actually a really bizarre plot when I think about it. However, it just kept me interested, I think, because it is a little bit strange how everything comes together. And also I did really enjoy our main characters, especially Effie. I really liked seeing her sort of grow as a person, especially when she is really sort of trapped in this very misogynistic world. The only thing that really confused me is there is this whole like prejudice about where people come from in the world. So I think it's like basically north and south. And where Preston comes from is kind of like the unfavorable place. So Effie is oppressed as a woman. He's oppressed because of where he was born. And Effie instantly sort of dislikes him because of it. And she has this very built-in prejudice based on where he was born. But then that doesn't really seem to come into play too much. It just seems to be there and then it goes. And I feel like this could have been explored a lot better. And also because Effie is fighting and she's, you know, someone who is judged a lot herself, it seems weird how much of a prejudice she has against Preston when she first meets him and knows where he comes from. But other than that, I think it's really well written and it's a good fun time because it's just a little bit different and weird. Then the 7th book I read this month was Finlay Donovan Jumps the Gun by Elle Cosimano. I've been reading this series for a time now, and obviously because it is book 3 in a series, I can't talk about it too much. However, this is kind of fun. They go to this sort of police training camp thing, and I'm not going to say any more than that because, you know, for those that maybe want to start the series, I'm not going to spoil anything, but it has a good fun part of the plot in here, I think. For those that don't know this series, I would say it's mystery with a bit of dark comedy in it. Kind of got like a little thriller element, but it's a lot softer. It's like a little bit humorous. I gave this one 4 stars because I do think the first book was just better for me. It was a little bit different. As the series continues, it does plateau a little bit, but it always keeps me engaged and I have fun with it. So I enjoy reading this series. Like, it's quite an easy read. And therefore, if you like your kind of like easy mystery light thrillers, I would say definitely give the Finlay Donovan series a try. I've spoken about it quite a few times, so if you haven't seen me talk about it, I just don't want to keep going on and on. For those that do watch all my videos, you will probably be like, oh, here we go again, explaining about first book. So go back and watch something I've spoke about it, or just give it a Google, honestly, because I think it's a really good series. Then my 8th read of the year was another one I read digitally, so I will display the cover, but that was actually an autobiography, and that is Matriach by Tina Knowles. What I've come to learn is I do quite enjoy an autobiography, especially it just breaks things up, and what I've started doing is just reading them really slowly throughout the month. So I'll like start them near the beginning and just read like maybe a couple of chapters a day and just slowly work through it through the month. So I tend to finish a bit later, but I've actually quite enjoyed doing it this way because I feel like I can't really read 2 books at once. I struggle to concentrate on that. But if it's an autobiography and a fiction, I'm not getting anything confused and it just works. And what I liked is because I had this digitally, my Kindle's easy to carry around. So if I was going to a hair appointment or the coffee shop, I could just, you know, take it with me very easily. So for those that maybe don't know, Tina Knowles is Beyonce's mum, and she talks about her life all the way from her childhood all the way through to now, sort of how much role she's had in Beyonce's career, certain aspects of Beyonce's life, but it is more focused on her, which I do appreciate because it's obviously her book. It was really nice learning about Solange, Beyonce's sister, because I quite liked her music and she sort of just vanished a little bit, but she kind of explains why, which is nice. She talks a lot about racism that she faced years ago, which was just very interesting for me. And then she obviously talks about things like how Destiny's Child was formed and everything like that. And I just found it super interesting to listen to. I've given it a 5-star rating like I do most autobiographies just because I'm not here to judge someone's life. So I just automatically give them 5 stars because they've written their life down and I think that's great. The 9th book I read was The Elsewhere Express by Samantha, Sotto, Yamboa. I read her book Watermoon last year, so this was on my radar to pick up. I think I gave Watermoon a 4-star rating, I think, maybe 4.25. I can't remember. So I was quite looking forward to this one. She writes in such beautiful prose. Her writing's stunning. It's a very whimsical, very abstract kind of writing, I guess, that she always has. But I felt Watermoon was a little bit more tangible than this one. So I would describe this, I guess, as a cozy fantasy, and I gave it 3.25 stars, which means I enjoyed it enough, but I honestly, I was disappointed with it. I think I had much higher expectations. Even though I rated Jennette McCurdy's book lower, I think I just expected that not to be my favourite, whereas I honestly thought that I might love this more than Watermoon. But anyway, this starts with our main character, Reid. She is waiting at a subway station to get on a train, and when her train arrives, she enters, but it's not her standard train. You could kind of see it as, in a way, she's got on the wrong train, but this is a fantasy train that picks people up that are supposedly like lost souls that have lost their way a little in life. Now, when she enters the train, someone called Q enters at the same time, and we follow from their perspectives. We come to learn that it's not normal for 2 people to end up on the train at the same time. The conductor makes this very clear because she only has like one of each thing. And then they are told to go and find their cabin. However, we are alerted to the fact there is now a stowaway on the train, and this is obviously like a bad threat to this train, and they are asked, the new people, to help with this so that it didn't cause mass panic against everyone else because they were there when this was discovered. So Reid and Q know about it. So they are asked to help find this stowaway and solve the problem. And then the book kind of follows them trying to find their cabin and also trying to find this stowaway. So like I said, it's a very kind of trippy plot. It has a lot of twists in it, which I sort of appreciated, but it felt a little much. I do really enjoy her beautiful writing, and I kind of enjoy the abstract nature of the book, but maybe this was a little too abstract. I feel like I wanted a few more moments to really soak in the absurd nature of this book but I didn't really get it because I feel like we were just moving through the train so fast. And also it started off feeling quite like a train, and then the descriptions were so bizarre, like it was really hard to picture a train. I was kind of expecting maybe something a bit more like the Polar Express, where like, you know, it's very strange, but it is essentially a train. However, I did really love the ending to the book, and I still think it's worth picking up if you're interested in it. I just think I had maybe slightly too high expectations of the book, and I just feel like the pacing was a little bit off. Like, I think I was really intrigued at the beginning to see what was happening, and the ending was great, but I just felt the middle moved through at a slightly odd pace for me. So I wasn't like super invested in this book, whereas I was hoping I would really, really love this story. And then the 10th and final book that I read in March was Beneath by Ariel Sullivan. This is another one that I mentioned in my anticipated reads of the year, and it did not disappoint. So just a quick backstory, I read Ariel Sullivan's book Conform last October when that released, and I loved it. I would have put it 6 stars if I ever gave that rating. And then I found out she was writing to a slightly different kind of pattern to most writers. So she had released Conform, and then this is actually the beginning of a new trilogy, but it acts as a prequel to Conform. I will start by saying I think you can read them standalone. Like, it would still make sense, but I think it's still better to read Conform first, because I feel like having the knowledge of that world and how it ended up just gives you a bit more understanding for this beginning. So these series are essentially like dystopian romances. I do love a bit of dystopian, I'm not gonna lie. So in this book we follow Sasha, and she's become a medic after this war that we are told about, and they are all living underground in this underground world now after this war, and she becomes known as Death's Angel. She gets this nickname because she seems to be really good with patients and helping them recover, and she also never seems to get sick herself. So this underground world is split into sort of different departments, I guess you could say, and there is a department called the Force. Now, she heals a lot of people from the Force, and there was a particular guy she helped, and he really shouldn't have survived, and he did, and I guess they sort of become friends after that, at least as friendly as you get in a underground controlled world. And then all of a sudden, she is drafted into the Force, and we find out this guy has drafted her in there himself. He wants a medic on his team because he thinks it will make going to the surface and investigating a lot safer. We learn there's lots of like traps and danger up on the surface, and they think that having a medic with them will be a really good decision for their team. So she gets drafted to their team in the Force against her will, which is not what she wants. And then while training her, she kind of has to deal with her own trauma from the war to sort of overcome her own fears and become part of this team and allow herself to actually make friends and allies. However, as they start working together and they go up on the surface, they start to realize that maybe this underground world isn't all it seems, and maybe there's something bad going on. So what I will say is Ariel Sullivan did it again, leaves it on a really bad cliffhanger. I think the one in Conform is slightly worse, but this is left on a really big cliffhanger overall, like you're right mid-story, but I do kind of like that. It's frustrating, but I like it at the same time because obviously I want to continue reading. I literally just devoured this book, to be honest. I really love her writing style. It just seems to really grasp me. If I'm being completely honest, even though I'm giving this a 5-star rating, I think I slightly preferred Conform because, as I said, I would have rated that like 6 stars if I ever did that. This is a solid 5-star though. It's still a very solid read for me, and I just love the whole series. And if you like a good sort of dystopian romance, please go pick up her books. I think they're great. I know they're slowly gaining in popularity, but I feel like they deserve even more than they have right now. And I know these aren't popular enough because Barnes & Noble didn't even have this in stock, and I had to order it from Amazon, and I want to get her books regularly in Barnes & Noble and being sold because that's what she deserves. So that is everything that I read in March, and I hope you've enjoyed going through that with me because I do feel like I had some very, very strong reads this month. Even if I had like a couple that were maybe a little bit disappointing to what I expected, I overall had a really good month. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I will see you again real soon. Bye!